Myself, I thought I'd start with just a quote to kind of frame up, what we're here for tonight, and what I'm working on in the CHS environment. So I love this quote. It says, "Physicians are people, not just providers. We have a moral responsibility to care for them because they are human beings whose well-being has intrinsic value, not just instrumental value for the system's goals." That's Dr. Tate Shanafelt, Chief Wellness Officer of Stanford Medicine. And I think it's a good way to kind of frame up this evening because, a little bit about myself and why I'm here, why I'm part of the Community Health Systems team. My name is Clay Linkus. I'm the Senior Director of Physician Engagement for Community Health Systems. And if you're not aware, Community Health Systems is going through quite an evolution over the last year or so. And as we move forward, some of those evolutions are seen in the priorities that our organization has decided are the most important things for us to focus on. And if you've not seen this or have not been familiar with this, part of what I hope you're encouraged to hear is that one of those 5 priorities is actually the experience that you have. So the physician experience. The other 4 you can see there are quality of care, which makes a lot of sense. We also want to continue focusing on the patient experience, and we're going to talk about that this evening because that's closely connected to the physician experience. And you can see the employee satisfaction, so all of our other team members that we work with. And then obviously cash flow, we have to maintain viability as an organization. But what I do want to draw your attention to is this piece in the middle around physician experience. And I've been with CHS for about 6 months now. I've spent the last 15 years doing consulting work for hundreds of health systems across the US and Canada. And most of the work is centered around either physician experience, employee engagement, patient experience, and really helping organizations become a great place for physicians and other clinicians to practice medicine. So I'm delighted to come alongside CHS and partner with our leaders across the organization as we work to make CHS an even better place for our physicians and clinicians. And so your hospitals there at Merit are a big part of this. If you want to kind of help, understand when we talk about the physician experience, what does that even mean? Some of the outcomes that I'm really focused on is we have a partnership and listening survey that's coming up in May. So we're going to be looking at how we can, demonstrate to our physicians that we are partners in the delivery of care, that they can have confidence in the organization that they're a part of, and that they're satisfied with leadership. And so that survey gives us a chance to understand how we're doing with that, where we're doing that well, and where we can get better at it. We're also going to be looking at physician retention and how we can make sure that we're not only attracting top talent and great physicians and clinicians, but that we are creating a place that they want to stay at for as long as possible. And so that retention piece is a big part of it as well. And then one piece of this is the physician-patient communication dynamic, and that's where we're going to spend some of our time this evening. But that effort that each of you all, put forth each day when you're interacting with patients to make sure that you're not only providing the highest quality clinical care, but that you're communicating with patients in a way that they understand that care, that they are partners with you in that care, and that they feel like they've had a great experience in that care delivery. So those are the big things that we're working on. Some of the work streams that we are focused on to help improve those outcomes are things like how we're communicating with physicians across the system, whether that's from the corporate level, whether it's at the hospital level. Examples of that some of you may have seen is we are now pushing out a monthly physician newsletter that's coming out each month. Hopefully you all have seen some examples of that. We are partnering with our hospital CEOs to make sure that they are actively what we call rounding on physicians. So that's a listening exercise where they make sure that they are intentionally partnering with physicians to really hear what's important to them, what we need to do to provide high quality care for the patients that are there, and how we can really make sure that we're listening to their feedback and getting their input on operational decisions. Obviously, a big part of the physician experience is EMR and clinical informatics optimization. So we're partnering closely with that team to really see, what are the big things that we need to do to improve digital technology, improve our EMR, workflows. And then there's the nursing physician communication piece. So how do we work better with our nurses to ensure that they are equipped with the information that you need as a physician to care for patients, and that those nurses are equipped with the education, training, and development that they need to provide that quality of care to your patients. And then really looking at how we can be better at simply recognizing and appreciating the work that you do as physicians, showing respect for the sacrifices you make, making sure that we're creating a place that demonstrates gratitude and appreciation for the efforts you put forth to deliver high quality care. Some future areas of focus that we will be looking at in the years ahead are things like physician onboarding, physician leadership development, and physician well-being. But I'm excited to come alongside Community Health Systems in this effort. And more than anything, what I want you to walk away from is just knowing that Community Health Systems is investing in you, in your success, in your longevity here with the organization. And we're excited to be an even better place for you to practice medicine. One of the things that we want to do as part of this work is make sure that we are equipping you with the education, the skills, the resources you need to deliver that exceptional patient experience that we know that you want to. And so one of the things I'm going to spend some time on tonight is this whole idea of patient experience, and as hospitalists, figuring out what are some reasons that we even care about patient experience, what are some things that we know about patient experience, and then how do we actually go about delivering it in each patient encounter. So that's where we're going to spend a lot of our time together. When I'm done with this, I'll make space at the end for any of you to ask me any questions, to share any maybe of your own experiences and observations, and maybe even best practices that you have found work well when it comes to patient experience. So something that goes along with those 5 priorities that Community Health Systems has is a new vision that some of you may have heard. And that new vision is to make the healthcare experience exceptional for our patients, for our communities, and each other. And you are part of that each other piece. So we want to make sure that the healthcare experience is not just exceptional for patients, but it's also exceptional for you as physicians. The part we're going to focus on tonight is really that how do we equip you as physicians to create that exceptional experience for the patients. And if you aren't aware, in this world of patient experience, there are lots of different tools and lots of different ways that patient experience can actually be measured. And one of the terms that many of you probably have heard at some point is this whole thing called the HCAHPS survey. And the HCAHPS survey is an inpatient only survey that's administered to patients who are discharged from the inpatient unit of the hospital. Some of them are planned admissions, some of them are unplanned admissions that come through the ER. But when they're discharged, they are likely to receive this HCAHPS survey. And inside of the HCAHPS survey, there are a set of questions that are referred to as the doctor communication domain. And those questions are 3 different questions that are asked this way. So the first question says, during this hospital stay, how often did doctors treat you with courtesy and respect? So I want you to pay attention also to the words that I've got in bold around how often. The second thing they're asked, or patients are asked, is during this hospital stay, how often did doctors listen carefully to you? The third question is, during this hospital stay, how often did doctors explain things in a way that you could understand? Now, if you'll notice, it's not asking, did it happen? It's asking, how often did it happen? It's also not asking, did they treat you like it was the Hilton or the Marriott? It's asking about a frequency analysis that the patient is basically assessing how often did these evidence-based best practices that lead to higher quality and safe care for the patients, how often did those things occur? And what you need to appreciate is that the answer scale on each of those questions is a 4-point scale, and the first answer that they can choose is a 4. And that 4 is termed or defined as always, meaning that that patient said, yeah, I always was treated with courtesy and respect by the doctors, or I always felt like the doctors listened carefully to me, or always doctors explained things in a way that I could understand. But right underneath 4 are the other 3 options. Number 3 is usually, number 2 is sometimes, and number 1 is never. And if you've ever been in a hallway conversation or in a meeting and somebody has said to you something about our hospital or our unit's top box score, what they mean is that 4 is the percentage of times that the patient said a 4 or that always. That is your percent top box. So if you said, hey, our percent top box for doctor communication is 77%, then that means that 77% of patients who fill out that HCAP survey said that doctors treated them with courtesy and respect. So we know that at Merit, and I'm going to give you some data to help you understand how Merit is performing. If you look on the left-hand side, you'll see that as a system, if you look at all community health systems, hospitals, about 60 different hospitals across the nation, if you look at that doctor domain, we see that the roll-up of those 3 questions, that the top box score over the last 12 months is a 76.2%, which means, like I was saying, about 76% of our patients are saying that those 3 questions happened always. And if you say, okay, well, how are the Merit Health Market hospitals performing compared to that? Well, I'm glad you asked, and you actually are doing a little bit better. So you're at 77.2% in your market. And if you go over to the right-hand side, if you guys want to have some friendly competition, you can actually see how the different hospitals in the Merit market actually compare. So we can see that even though your average is a 77.23, there is quite a bit of variation between Merit Health Rankin and Merit Health Natchez. So 82.6 down to 74.61. So I'm sure some of you guys can, elbow each other if you're doing better, and maybe if you're not where you want to be, you can be compelled to, try to take that to the next level. But what I do want you to do is to have an awareness that there's actually a lot of great things that are happening at all the hospitals. I mean, if you think about it, 75% of patients are saying, hey, this is actually happening really well. The problem is that when you start comparing these results to other hospitals around the country, you'll realize that a 75 or 76 or 77 simply isn't reflective of where we all want to be as healthcare providers. So if you look down at the bottom of this slide, you'll see this color gradient scale that teaches us what the percentile ranking is. And the other way to think about this is that if the color is a blue, then that means that that hospital is performing between the 50th and the 75th percentile. If the color is a yellow, that means that that hospital is performing between the 25th and the 50th percentile. And if the hospital is a red, it's performing less than 25th percentile. The other way to think about this is if you're in that 50th to 75th percentile, what that means is that even though you have what seems like a decent score, about half of the hospitals in America are performing better than you are. And on the other end of the spectrum, if you're in that 25th percentile or below, at least 75% of hospitals in the country are performing better than you are. And when I say performing better, what I mean is that the patients that are being discharged from those facilities are perceiving, and that's the important piece of this, they are perceiving that the doctors in those facilities are communicating more consistently with them than we are at our facilities. So I hope that helps give you some understanding and education around how this whole doctor communication thing is measured. Now, I do want to recognize the fact that many of you are absolutely doing a wonderful job with this. And I went back through the comments of your HCAP surveys for the last 12 months, and I pulled out some of the positive comments that your patients are saying about physicians at the Merit Hospital. So things like, oh, and by the way, I want to apologize in advance. These comments are written verbatim from the patients. So if they misspelled your name or their grammar or issues or typos, know that they're verbatim from the patients. So, a patient said Dr. Van Landingham and Andrew Morris are 2 excellent providers. They explain, they listen, and are concerned and caring. Laura Miller, NP, was also like that. Took care of things I needed quickly and looked forward to her visits. She is kind and cheerful. Another comment, Dr. Van Landingham, I assume that may be the same person, was awesome and treated me with respect and also kind to me. Dr. Sinclair was very helpful. He's the best doctor I've had in a long time. Dr. Carroll and his nurses was great. First time in the hospital, they made it very comfortable. Dr. Van Landingham and his assistant Matthews, I think, but there was two excellent doctors and an assistant. They answered my question to what I would need to know about my health, and they did their job. Dr. Kneep, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that, was awesome. He explained to Eric after my surgery. Dr. Tipton took time in explaining surgical procedures and answered all my questions. I think the surgery was a success, and I'm recovering in physical therapy. Very good surgeon, very good experience. Dr. Borum was very thorough and explained my condition. Now, I appreciate that some of the physicians and maybe other clinicians that are even listed here are maybe not even hospitalists. They may be other type of specialists, but I pulled these from the med-surg unit, so they were the most likely to be patients that maybe some of you all have seen as hospitalists. So the reason I wanted to share this is that there's a lot of patients where we're getting it right, but there's also a lot of patients where we didn't get it right. So you can see these are also some comments where I blanked out names because that wasn't really the point. I'm not really interested in, trying to throw shade on any particular physician, but I do want you to understand that sometimes even though we're doing a wonderful job clinically, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're always communicating with that patient in a way that creates a great experience for them. So you see things like Dr. Blank is not a good example for residents. He never put stethoscope on my dad. He evaluated dad from the doorway. Doctor came in the room after a week only because I complained, or the doctors just came in the room and left the whole 5 days in and out. Dr. Blank was arrogant, acting very holier than thou. He didn't tell me who he was and got offended because I thought he was a nurse. Only one doctor came by in the emergency room, said with my numbers I could have a heart attack and die. Had never been told I had heart problems before. I was upset because I was so weak. Comment did not help, added to anxiety. Doctors could listen more and not make me feel rushed. Discharged doctor was not familiar with me or my needs. Lack of communication with family and patient, acted like patient was beneath them. Doctor in too big of a hurry. Hospitalists and specialists didn't communicate with each other, and we were treated disrespectfully by the main doctor, pretty certain it was a contract doctor. Now again, I'm not suggesting that any of these are even applied to anybody specifically on this call, but I do want you to understand that in your facilities, there's examples of where we didn't always get it right when it comes to doctor communication. But here's the good news, is that every single one of these comments can actually be addressed if we learn and start to utilize some evidence-based best practices that will help us as physicians and clinicians really demonstrate great doctor communication to our patients. And that's what I'm going to spend the rest of my time sharing with you, is there actually is a solution to all this. So the first thing I want you to appreciate is that when it comes to creating a great patient experience, there's actually a lot of science to this. And part of what I want you to understand is that a really great patient experience is actually when we as a physician or clinician hold all of these 5 things in tension, where we bring to that interaction a level of our values, our authenticity, standardized best practices, emotional intelligence, and personalization. And I won't go through everything on this slide, but just to help kind of put this together, at the end of the day, part of what has to happen to create a great patient experience is for us to be authentic. We have to do things in a way that feels genuine, that feels like we're present, and it's not just because somebody handed us a script or great things to say to patients, but it's got to come across in a way that the patient feels like we actually wanted to say those things. We actually wanted to be there. We wanted to do those things in that way. So it's got to be authentic. We then want to make sure that we are aligning our behaviors and our words with what we call values in action. And these are community health systems values in action that would help us be even better when it comes to patient experience. And it's things like putting the patient first, not our needs, but the patient's needs, making sure that we work together as a team, making sure that we never settle. Then you get into these standardized best practices, and I'm going to come back to that because there's a whole host of these that I want to make you aware of, and you can choose to decide how much you want to lean into those best practices, because that's really where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. We also want to be emotionally intelligent. If you're not familiar with that phrase, it's this idea of us growing in self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management, and reading situations in a way that makes sure that we are applying the right words, the right behaviors in a way that's going to resonate the best with that patient. And then you've got personalization, and I'll give you some examples of this. Sometimes with certain patients in certain situations, we need to focus on being more fast. Sometimes we need to focus on being more friendly. Sometimes we need to focus on being more prescriptive, and sometimes we need to focus more on asking questions. Sometimes we need to be more high tech, sometimes we need to be more low tech. And we could go through some other examples with that. But as a physician, as a clinician, what you want to do is figure out, how do I grow in my skill sets around all 5 of these things so that I'm managing them all in tension and I'm creating that exceptional patient experience. The part that I want to focus on tonight is this standardized best practice. And you can see there's a number of them here, but there's one of them that we have found for the last 20 years has really proven to help physicians really move the needle the most when it comes to patient experience. And that's this standardized practice called ADET plus the promise. Now, some of you may have heard of this before, some of you may have not. I also want to make you aware that if you want to go down this rabbit trail of patient experience best practices, there's a whole host of them that we can make you aware of and help you understand what they look like. And they're listed on this slide, and I'll give you a copy of this so that you have this for your records if that's helpful. And know also that every month we are pushing out in our physician newsletter an opportunity for you to have access to more resources like this. So last month it was the ADET plus the promise, and if a physician wanted it, we would send them a job aid that would help them navigate through that tool as well. So these are just some examples of things that will help you in the patient experience. The part that I want to focus on the most is this tactic called ADET plus the promise. And this tactic, some of you probably are familiar with, it goes back about 20 years. It was introduced by a firm back about 20 years ago called the Studer Group. The Studer Group was acquired later by Huron, but it's known throughout the healthcare industry as a communication framework that really helps address many current or common patient anxieties. And it's an acronym, so it's AIDET, and then there's another one that's been added at the bottom called the promise. And the A stands for acknowledge, then it's introduce, then duration, then explain, then thank you, and then that promise. The acknowledge piece is exactly what it sounds like. It's us as human beings making sure that we are acknowledging that patient, their family, or any other stakeholder in the patient encounter with the proper eye contact, with the proper facial expressions, with the proper body language, and doing that in a way that lets them know that, hey, we see you, we're aware of you, we notice you. The second part is the introduction. And this is where a lot of physicians underestimate, or maybe I should say they overestimate how many patients actually know their name and actually know that they are the doctor. You even saw in some of the comments on the previous slides that many of our patients at Merit didn't even know that we were the doctor. So that we assume sometimes that because maybe how we were introduced or handed over by a nurse or someone else that patient knows. But a good solid introduction is when we actually share with them our name, our role, and here's another little magical piece, some of our experience. So in other words, what you're trying to do is not only clearly identify yourself, and honestly that's just good safe practice, but also building some credibility and reducing their anxiety by helping them understand about your training, your experience, how many patients you've taken care of, how long you've been at the organization, because all of that helps build confidence and reduce anxiety and helps the patient be more compliant with the care plan. The duration piece, that third one, that's when we, as physicians and clinicians, we make sure that we use very defined time increments when we are describing when the patient can expect something. So we try to avoid using phrases like as soon as possible or quickly, because those comments are actually very subjective. And what we want to do instead is use a principle called under promise and over deliver. The easiest example of this is that if we know something's going to take an hour, I might tell them it's going to take 90 minutes. Because if it does take an hour, I've actually exceeded their expectations. But the fun part is I was the one who set the expectations. So it's always a better practice to disappoint the patient now only to delight them later, instead of trying to delight them now only to disappoint them later. So that duration piece is important. The explain is simply that. It is us narrating our care to the patient in a way that helps them understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and really filling in some of those quiet moments with the patient with our words to help them understand what's happening. The thank you is just letting the patient know that we're grateful for them, letting them know that, hey, we appreciate them trusting us with their care. We appreciate them maybe being patient. We appreciate them choosing our hospital. Those kind of things go a long way to expressing gratitude. And then the promise. The promise is our commitment to doing something for the patient. Hey, I commit to providing the highest quality of care that we can provide here at our facility. I commit to getting back to you by the end of the day. I commit something. So it's making a verbal commitment where you're giving the patient your word to do something that you know the patient is looking forward to, and that helps solidify that experience also. So if you do this really well, we know that it's going to help improve that patient's perception of your communication. You're going to help improve that experience with the patient. But here's a couple of pro tips. It's intended to be a framework and a mindset, not a robotic script. I also want to encourage you to focus less on the question of, do you have to do AIDET with every patient every time, and simply focus more on the anxiety issues that AIDET addresses. So does that patient feel seen? Does that patient know who we are? Does that patient know their plan of care? Do they know how long something is? And it's always a better rule to assume that the answer to those questions is no until you have confirmation that the answer is yes. This is the third thing I'll tell you, is that the sequence of AIDET doesn't have to follow the acronym sequence. So in other words, sometimes it makes more sense to do the duration at the beginning, and it might make more sense to do the thank you at the beginning. So you can piece it together in a way that uses your judgment and your discretion. And not every letter is needed in every counter. So it's an opportunity for you to use some critical thinking to say, hey, this part's needed now, this part's not. And here's the pro tip. It's actually not just meant for basic patient encounters. You can use AIDET when you're introducing new medications. You can use it when you're introducing new tests, new procedures, and even with colleague communication, it's a best practice to use when you're doing handovers and communication with consults, etc. So the ask of you, if you're on this call, is that from tonight moving on, is try to commit to using AIDET plus the promise in your patient encounters, and that's going to help you deliver that patient experience that we know you want to. So Dr. Oden and team, I'm going to pause here and open up the room to see what questions may exist. If you guys have maybe feedback from me, or maybe even things you've learned along the way about patient experience, we'd love to hear from some of you before we wrap up our time together.
Hey, Frank, this is Dr. Oden. I did have a question for you, because it's probably been one that has caught me, I'm going to say off guard, and just wanted your thoughts on it. And that is, in this day and age with the patient portal, where they can get in and read a note, maybe that was written by you or someone else in the chart, maybe even a half hour before you walk in the room, and there's an announcement about something that's written in the note, and you weren't exactly prepared for that statement or comment that was made. Do you have any thoughts on how to work your way through something like that?
Yeah, and that is a newer nuance to this whole patient experience and patient encounter world. I think if I was in your all's shoes, one of the things that I would want to do is try to assess pretty quickly how familiar the patient was to that information. So I might even have a question that I start to ask patients and just say, hey, is there any chance you've accessed the patient portal? Is that something you're aware of? And what have you read there? Because to your point, what's going to feel better to the patient is if they share information with you and you react to it, versus you share information that the patient feels is contrary to something that they think they know. And so if you're able to react to something that they tell you, that's going to be a better situation than them hearing something from you and they're going, well, that's not at all what I read in my chart. So I would try to assess that first to find out, do they have familiarity with it? If so, what are they familiar with? What feels good about what they've read? Is there anything that concerns them? And really assess that before you try to share with them, your own assessment or your own knowledge.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. I think we've got somebody with a question.
Okay.
Are we going to use those HCAT reviews for ourselves, or is that something that you guys are only able to do?
And I'm so sorry. I heard the voice, but I couldn't make out what was being said.
Okay, what he was saying, Clay, is is there a way that they could see the HCAP responses, or is that something that only the corporate office can do?
So there should be somebody at your local facility that has access to this and could work to pull this for you. One of the challenges I will tell you with the HCAP survey, and you all can appreciate this being hospital medicine, is attribution, right? So which physician is the survey attributed to? And so I do want to acknowledge that that is a shortcoming of the HCAP survey. So it's very difficult, if not almost impossible, to attribute individual survey results of the HCAP survey to individual providers, but it's not as difficult if that comment literally lists out a doctor's name, right? So there should be somebody at your facility that can pull that front for you. And if you discover that that maybe doesn't exist, let me know, and that may be something we can work on putting in place in the future as well. I will say that there's not a desire to hide that from you. It's more of just, is there a resource to pull it, and are you going to be able to see something that is attributable enough to, a person that's helpful? Here's the level you can get down to. You can pull it down by the unit, so you can see it at that level. So I can go into a single hospital and pull results by unit, and so that is helpful to some degree.
Okay, thank you. It looks like Dr. Williams has his hand up.
Go right ahead.
Are you all able to hear me clearly?
Yes.
If you're unable to attribute HCAP scores to a particular provider, unless their name is exactly or specifically denoted, how is it then that a person will get an HCAP score attributed to their name if we don't, on average or most of the time, know who the provider is?
I think, and I'll ask Dr. Odin to maybe share a perspective on that, but I believe what's actually being attributed is either the unit score or the departmental score or the hospital score, not a score that is specific to that individual provider. I could be wrong on that, but that's my understanding. And Dr. Odin, clean that up if I'm misspeaking there.
Josh, we have been able historically, Clay's exactly right. The unit score is very important to us, and actually it's very consistent. And so you see parts of the hospital you can improve with. We have been able to pull some of the HCAP information, but it's basically based on who the patient is admitted to. And so that's who, is attributed that score when we break it down in that environment.
Yeah. So to kind of clean up what I said, you can see who the patient was, the discharging physician or the admitting physician. Those are the things you can see. What my comment was that what's challenging, if you take a patient that's been there for 3 or 4 or 5 days, there's a likelihood that multiple physicians have encountered that patient, right? But it's ultimately going to be the discharging physician that survey tends to be attributed to the most time. So that's the shortcomings in it. And I'm sorry if I messed that, created confusion around that.
All right, anybody else with any questions?
The one thing I will leave you all with, in addition to just this quote, is as you all are thinking about, which patients, if you're gonna prioritize extra effort, if you're gonna put forth extra effort to try to create a great experience, what we know from our data at CHS is that if you think about the difference between patients that are planned admissions versus unplanned admissions, what we tend to see at most hospitals is that the experience of the patients who were planned admissions is significantly better than the patients who were unplanned. So in other words, if you are caring for a patient and that patient got admitted from the emergency department, there is a much stronger probability that that patient is going to have a less favorable survey response than the patient who had a planned admission. So if you're going to go above and beyond and do things extra, it is those patients that we probably need to put forth that extra effort, because they're the ones that are probably going to have the greater likelihood of having an unfavorable experience.
But we really appreciate your time this evening. It was very informative, and everyone, I think, will take something to the bedside as a result. Thank you, sir.
Good. You guys are welcome to share these slides as much as it's helpful, and thank you all for all you're doing to provide great care for our patients. Y'all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
We've got just a couple more slides, if y'all can hang with us, just for the business part, so we'll share our screen here. All right, so